Welcome to the One Stop Business Workshop. From what I understand, the final One Stop Business Workshop of the series. I see that they've saved the best for last. My name's Uytae Lee. I produce documentaries, I'm sure like many of you here on this call, and sort of the area I specialize in is in kind of these urban planning city issues. And for this call today, I will be your moderator. Now, for those of you who don't have a clear visual on me, I would describe myself as a Korean Canadian, young-ish guy, hopefully. I'm wearing a white shirt and I'm calling in from my home office here in Vancouver, which honestly feels like a luxury sometimes to have in Vancouver. Now, today's session is about pitching unscripted content, and we're very lucky today to be joined by some key folks from some key networks across our country, and I'm going to give them a quick introduction right now. So first off, we have Yasmin Abbasakour, who's the production executive at CBC Unscripted. Next, we have Sheila Peacock, who's a production executive at CBC Regions. Next, we have Patrice Ramsay, who's the Senior Manager for Independent Production at the Knowledge Network. We have Adam Garnet-Jones, who's the Director of TV Content and Special Events at Aboriginal People's Television Network, also APTN. We have Jim Krysko, who's the Content Development Executive for the Central Region at Accessible Media Inc., or AMI. And finally, we have Alexandra Roberts, who's the Commissioning Editor for Documentaries, Programming, and Content at TVO. I'm really excited to have you all here on this call today. Thanks so much for your time and expertise. And I kind of wanted to start by saying that, in many ways, I feel like I can relate to a lot of the people on this call. I have maybe pitched a couple of things before in my sort of career, but still very much figuring out the landscape of what the process looks like, how to get a pitch in, what to expect. And so I really hope that today is a bit of a joint learning opportunity with myself and the people here on this call today. Hopefully by the end of the session, you'll have some key takeaways, just again, on what to expect, what the procedure looks like. Now, I'm going to start us off with some questions that I hope cover some of the core bases. But I want to let people in the call know that we will also be having an audience Q&A portion for this call in the second half. So if you have a question right now, or if you think of a question during a call, save them for that time. To get your question in, we ask you to use the questions on the Zoom Q&A sort of tab, or the YouTube live comment section. We've got some CBC folks in the background compiling them, and they'll be feeding them to me later. Now, if we aren't able to get to your question, we will actually try to provide some information via a follow-up email after the session. So even if it doesn't get asked for this session, there's still a great chance that it'll be answered later. Now, I also want to mention at this time that there will be ASL, closed captioning, and French translations available if you are on Zoom. And if you are on YouTube, ASL and closed captioning are available as well. Now, finally, before we get started with our first presentation, I want to acknowledge that I want to acknowledge those Indigenous nations on whose lands we live and work, as well as the treaty territories, the unceded territories, and nations from coast to coast on which we conduct our daily business. For me, I'm calling in from the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Alrighty, so let's get started with the first question. So I kind of wanted to kind of have the first bucket around maybe a bit more of getting a little bit more in depth into the role you have at your network. And then, of course, the types of pitches you're looking for, the content ideas that, you're prioritizing right now, and then the stuff that, you aren't looking for right now. And maybe to start us off, Sheila, I know you best, so I'm going to pick on you if you don't mind me, picking you first.
Okay, great. Yes, my name is Sheila. I'm the CBC Executive for Independent Productions in BC and Alberta. And today I'm representing the 5 regional Absolutely Canadian producers across the country. So the genre that I'm talking about is called Absolutely Canadian at CBC. I am a woman of European descent with brown shoulder-length hair and bangs, and I'm wearing a blue t-shirt with a blue sweater. So, Absolutely Canadian, there are 5 regional producers across the country. We work on 1 hour, one-off documentaries and unscripted films. They are regional-based stories with universal appeal. So they're regional to the regions that we work in. So my example is BC and Alberta. They're made by emerging filmmakers who have the ability to produce and complete the story. We don't take an idea and find the filmmaking team for you. So you do have to have the ability to make it yourself. You don't have to have worked with a broadcaster before, but you do have to have that ability to produce to CBC's broadcast standards. We are shown in family prime time on TV, so that means no crime or adult-themed stories. We're looking for exclusivity, in front of the camera and behind the lens. We give a broadcast license for 6 years, all CBC platforms, including GEM, Network, TV, Explore, Digital, and Social, all geocached to Canada. We're looking for original stories, characters, and angles, especially from people and communities who are underrepresented. Stories told from the heart by both the filmmakers and the characters, and stories that make the world a better place through learning, understanding, empathy, and inspiration. We're looking for evergreen story arcs so they're relevant in years to come to watch. And so that means no current headline news stories. And with a pre-licensed broadcast license, we are involved from the start of the project to the release of the film. So that's why it's a great genre for emerging filmmakers.
Cool. Thanks so much, Sheila. And I can attest to that. Having, sorry, for those of you who aren't aware already, the one person I have worked with on this call is Sheila. And, that I will say as an emerging, or someone who was really just figuring this genre out, it was so wonderful to have a producer who's kind of involved right from the ideation phase to the execution of it, just to have like one consistent person. Now, I'm going to move on to another panelist here, and I'm just going to go around my Zoom window. Jim Krysko, would you like to tell us a little bit more about your role at AMI and the content your network is looking for?
Absolutely. Thanks, Uytae. My name is Jim Krysko. I am a white male, brown with slightly graying hair, people tell me, but I don't admit to it. I'm in my home office. I've got an on-air sign behind one corner of my shoulder and a mini drum set behind the other. So I represent AMI Accessible Media Incorporated, which is actually 3 services: AMI TV, which is our English service; AMI Tele, which is our French service within Quebec; and AMI Audio, which is essentially a radio station across the country on TV. I represent my territory. I'm the development specialist, content development person for Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. But for today, I can answer questions from across the country, whatever you may have. What we're looking for, what AMI is looking for, is content that is by, for, and about the disability community. So our content is reflects the life of the disability community in Canada. We do want Canadian stories. We do want stories that are authentic. So therefore, we require persons from the disability community to be in key creative roles for our projects. What we do, if you have perhaps if you're from the disability community, you have ideas, but you don't have necessarily a production community to draw on, we will match you up with a production team in order to get work done. So what we're looking for is really ideas that are very, very authentic. We do work on both licensing projects and service. So service is where we would pay for the entire project, but retain the licensing. Others for CMF, etc. For different financial structures, we will go into licensing, typically 6 years, sometimes a little longer, and we look at domestic licensing for that. So I'll leave you at that because I'm sure there'll be questions that'll be answered later, but that's essentially what AMI is all about.
Thanks so much, Jim. Appreciate your insight. I'm sure, we'll get into the nitty-gritty later. But before then, I want to move on to our next esteemed panelist. I'm seeing Patrice Ramsay next on my screen. So how about, you get into your role and sort of the content your network is looking for.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Patrice Ramsay. I'm the Senior Manager of Independent Production here at Knowledge Network. So I've got brown grayish hair. I'm wearing an olive colored t-shirt, and I'm wearing silver wireframe glasses. So for those of you who are not familiar with Knowledge Network, we are BC's public educational broadcaster. We broadcast in British Columbia and we stream across Canada. So we are free and we are commercial free. And projects that are of interest to us are in the documentary space. So we are looking for documentary series as well as one-offs, and those one-offs could be half hours, 1 hours, or feature length. So we are not looking for shorter format documentaries. So there's basically 3 potential ways that we can work with the independent film community. The first way is through acquisition. So that Knowledge is primarily an acquisition-based network, and the appropriate time to approach us is once the film or the project is complete and the rights are available. We can also look at projects as a potential second window license to help close your financing. So the appropriate time to approach us at that stage is once the development phase is complete and the lead broadcaster is confirmed. And we can do that with producers across Canada. And then if you are specifically a BC producer, we can commission documentaries with you as well. So when we work with a BC producer on a commission, we like to come in early. And so we typically come on board and support the development phase and move forward through production. So those are kind of really broad strokes. In terms of our one-off documentaries, they fall under our Storyville strand. This is our flagship documentary strand. They have Pride and Place within our schedule. We're looking for really authentic stories that really show a diverse range of voices and perspectives. And we also, some of the earlier prime time, we have like documentary series that we look at as both acquisitions and second windows. So I think that's a good start for now, and let everybody else have an opportunity, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Patrice. And I'm already hearing some really cool insights as to just the various different kinds of relationships that can be established between a producer and the network, and kind of along different stages that you can really make a pitch and make a sort of an introduction to working with you. It's really cool to hear. Next on my Zoom window, Adam Garnet-Jones, would you like to give us some insights about your role, pitches you're looking for?
Sure thing. All right. So my name is Adam Garnet-Jones. I am a light-skinned Cree Métis in my 40s, wearing a black t-shirt and Labradorite necklace with a blurry background behind me. So I'm very mysterious. I manage all the executives who deal directly with independent producers on all of the content for the network, except for the news. So we do content in kind of every genre, but in the unscripted space, we have a ton of documentary series that we do. That's really our focus, and those series most often fall into a number of different content buckets. And one of those is Indigenous food. Another is land, animals, and nature. That includes kind of land-based cultural series like Yukon Harvest and Merchants of the Wild, which you might have seen. Community and culture is another one. Indigenous histories is another, and supernatural. And of course, there's a lot of overlap between all of those different kind of genres and content focuses, but that's what a lot of our documentary series tend to focus on. We also commission feature-length one-off docs from independent producers all across the country. I didn't really talk about what APTN is, but we are the national Indigenous broadcaster. So we broadcast all over the country. Currently, we have 4 different feeds. And we, as I said, do all kinds of different content in every genre. We work primarily with majority Indigenous owned companies on all of our first window projects, but we can open that up a little bit when it comes to second windows. we don't really do much in the way of reality or lifestyle programming. But if the price is right, we're always open. Um, got tons more to say, but I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, so safe to assume we aren't expecting a sort of a keeping up with the Kardashians by APTN sort of show anytime soon.
Like I said, if the price is right, well, and if the pitch is strong, we'll see.
All right. Well, so those of you on the call, it's all about the price. Okay. Last off, but not least by all means, Yasmin and Basakur, would you like to kind of give a quick intro to yourself and the content you're prioritizing?
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Yasmin Abasakur. I'm the executive in charge of unscripted development for CBC and CBC Gem. I am a light-skinned South Asian woman with long dark hair, and I'm wearing big white headphones, so I look like a super cool DJ right now. I work mostly with our long-running factual series. So we are the department that does the Great Canadian Baking Show, Still Standing, Bollywed, Push, Best in Miniature, Race Against the Tide, Dragon's Den, Family Feud, Stuff the British Stole. And I also work very closely with my documentary colleagues, and I'm happy to answer those questions as well. The number one thing that within documentary, there are a few buckets that and you can find out more about all of this information on our independent producers page, which the links are in the document that was shared before you signed up or when you signed up for this webinar. It is a really great resource for producers, and we encourage all of our producers to look those pages over closely. They're pages we update constantly and are on top of, so they're really useful. And in documentary, there are a few different buckets. There's the nature of things, our long-running nature series. And I'll just be very brief as I speak about each one, or this is going to go run way long. But they're always saying they look for science stories. They want stories. They want storytelling, and that's across all of our documentaries. They want to prioritize character and story over topics. So when you're pitching to anyone on our documentary team, that's something to keep in mind. What is the story? Who are the characters? How are we drawing in the viewer? In factual, a really great way to figure out what we want is to look at what we have on the air right now. And we don't always have the luxury of saying that, but we're really excited about our offerings. So all those shows I listed off the top, they're available for free on CBC Gem, and detailed in our independent producers language is why we like each one and what we're looking for in those veins as well. So I'm going to leave it there for now, and I'm sure there'll be more detailed questions we can get into.
For sure. Well, thanks so much, Yasmin. And I have to apologize. I missed one of our panelists in my round. So last but definitely not least, Alexandra from TVO.
Thanks, Uytae. So my name is Alexandra Roberts. I'm the commissioning editor of Docs at TVO. I am a pale-skinned woman with long brown hair, a black sweater, and medium-sized hoop earrings. I'm sitting at home in front of a gray background with a poster above my head. So as commissioning editor of Docs, I oversee all of our original commissions, which are branded as TVO Originals, as well as our pre-buys and our acquisitions. And there are different ways that projects get land in our inboxes, so to speak, and I can get into that a little bit later. But what I'll start with is our mandate. We're an educational public broadcaster that streams everything across Canada online, but ultimately broadcasts within Ontario. Our mandate as an educational broadcaster is something that we interpret quite broadly. So for us, anything that comes to us has to be enriching in some capacity. That means that we want it to either be participating in a discourse that's happening in the world or starting its own discourse. We want tangible takeaways. We want programming to be thoughtful. Things that would not necessarily work for us then would be maybe semi-similar to Adam, although I think he might have a little more flexibility. Lifestyle and reality, we certainly could not do Keeping Up with the Kardashians, unfortunately, for those fans in the room. That would not be a TVO project. We also, what else can I tell you? Things that would not work for us as well would be like instructional how-to videos, cooking videos. We couldn't do Barefoot Contessa. I think that sort of covers what we couldn't take in-house, because the reality is that our mandate can be quite broad. A lot of what we commission will be like current affairs, POV, social justice films, but it can be so much more than that. We'll do nature documentaries. We will assess projects on a case-by-case basis. I'm hesitant to go into more. I would actually kind of rather leave it there for now. We can get into some of the weeds because, again, our mandate is so broad. I think I have a lot to say about all of the other questions. So why don't we just get into it?
Sounds great. And yeah, you're right.
Great.
Like sometimes it's easier to like define what you don't want rather than to get into what you want because it's just
100%.
so much, so much
We
out there.
really do cover a lot. We're very lucky in that sense.
That's wonderful. I mean, that's really what's coming out to me right now, just from all of the responses you guys gave, is just the sheer diversity of content that there's an appetite for in this country, unless you're producing Keeping Up with the Kardashians. So, it's really cool to see. And I'm really getting the sense that if someone has a compelling story idea, even if it might feel a bit niche, there's very likely a network that would be interested in that. Now, yes, I'm kind of wary of our time too, and I know we want to leave plenty of room for audience questions. So I'm going to kind of consolidate the last two questions I have on my end into one sort of beefy question, but I'd still love to hear from everyone on the panel, really kind of around sort of the process of pitching, what that kind of looks like, and then what that sort of pitch should include, some of the formalities around, is it one sentence or is it like a book, everything in between. And so kind of maybe to define a little bit more, I think one big question that comes up often is sort of like, what time of the year is a good time to pitch? What time isn't a good time of the year to pitch? And then once people are pitching to you, what should they include within their proposal? And I'm gonna, maybe start with Adam Garnet-Jones, if you don't mind.
Sure. All right. You might have to remind me of some parts of the question, but I'll start out with time of the year. So we work mostly with producers that have developed with us. I will say that's probably the best time to come in with us, especially if you haven't worked with APTN before, is to ask about development and get in with us at that time. A lot of our development is done starting in December through February, because we do an intake that is set up so that we can get decisions out for March-ish, so that producers have an opportunity to bring our development dollars in to trigger the CMF IP program, which is CMF Indigenous Program for Development. So that's a good time, and also especially for emerging producers, that's a good program to access because it means that APTN is putting in some money, but development is also being supported by additional CMF dollars, and so the barrier for entry for us as a broadcaster is lower. So that's a really great time. We also have development RFPs that come out throughout the year. So I would encourage all of you, if you're interested, to go to the APTN producers website. Just Google APTN producers. It'll direct you to our corporate website. And you can sign up for our mailing list, and we send out monthly newsletters, but every time we have a request for proposals coming out for development or for production, that's where they come in. There's a similar kind of a timeline for the production intake for the IP program for production. That's, again, the Indigenous Language Program. The CMF's IP program supports series that have a minimum of 20% on-screen Indigenous language. And so that's, again, a really great place for newer producers, emerging producers, because those series tend to be almost exclusively documentary. And again, the barrier to entry for us as a broadcaster is lower because we're putting in, well, the minimum is 10% of the license fee, 10% of the overall budget in our license fee. And then a lot of the money is coming from the CMF Indigenous program. So again, that's a great place for emerging producers in particular to come to us. What is that?
Well, maybe a quick bit on just like what is ideally included in one of these pitches, like in the proposal.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So for production, you want to come with something really fulsome. So you want to come with a pitch deck, you want to come with a demo, you've got your production budget, and sometimes most importantly of all, you come with your financing, because a lot of what we're looking for as broadcasters is to know that, in addition to the content being interesting and something that can fit on the network, and because our content umbrellas are so broad, there's a lot of things that we're interested in. But talking about the reality TV example, it's really hard to fund that in this country. And so if you come to us with a great idea, and you have a really compelling pitch deck, but you bring us a financing plan and you need, $1.5 million from us, and we've never worked with you before, we're going to look at that and say, it's just not realistic. It doesn't make good business sense for us. So financing plan is super key. But then for development, it's a lot simpler. It's a lot, the materials that you need to come in with are a lot less developed, as per the nature of what development is. But again, I think you have to know not only what the story that you're wanting to tell is and why you want to tell that story, but I think the most important thing, again, for development or production is to know what you're offering the audience. Because so often people come to us and they're like, I have this incredible story. It's really important. We really want to tell it. And when it comes to how the story is being told, it hasn't been thought through to the extent that an audience is going to see it and think like, oh yeah, I really want to watch that. And that, if you don't have that, you don't have a show. You have a show that
A passion
on
project.
TV. It's a passion project, but it's a passion project that isn't reaching out and trying to communicate to an audience. And that's ultimately what everybody really, really wants.
For sure. And I thought, what? Yeah, we should ideally be passionate about all of the shows we're producing. But I'm hearing some really core insights from you, Adam, that, yeah, like to some extent, yeah, like getting your ducks in a row, getting the financing and knowing like how realistic it is to have a show like yours financed, but also really knowing your audience. I mean, I feel like I have to kind of remind myself of that too. Like this is in many ways a very selfless endeavor. You have to understand what is the appetite for the thing you want to produce. It's not just about you. It's really about what the audience wants. So really appreciate your insights already. I'm going to quickly move on to Jim Krysko. Would you like to kind of give us a sense of, what are the windows for pitching AMI and yeah, what those pitches ideally should include?
Sure. We don't have a set of deadlines for pitching, so you can pitch us year round. We do make decisions throughout the year on, especially on service content, but also deciding how our CMF envelope is going to be allocated. So we do end up green lighting CMF stuff typically in April, because the CMF envelope comes in early April. The method that you would pitch us is if you go to ami.ca and you scroll to the bottom of the page, there's an independent producers tab. So if you go into that tab, you would pitch us through, we call it the portal, through the independent producers portal, and it would be assigned regionally to whoever is involved with that region. So in my case, if it's Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, it comes to me. We make decisions, not sometimes not immediately, but we do view everything, and typically take a couple of months to decide if we want more. What we're asking for at that stage is a treatment, a pitch deck if you have it, an idea of budget. You don't have to get into detail. We understand at this point, everything you're doing is on your own dime. So keep in mind what you're sending through to us is essentially sales material. You're trying to sell us on this idea. So think accordingly. Give us something that is very interesting, would be very interesting to our audience. Give us an idea that our audience, and that's really important. I would bet for any of the broadcasters on this call, really get to know who you're pitching and land it, where into a space where we can't say no. And so once we see the pitches, if there's something that we want more information on, or we want to go into development, at that point is where we'd ask for more detail, like detailed budgets, demo reels, that type of thing. So I hope that answers the question. We for us, the important part is the pitch. Definitely look at what we have on on our website now, and what we have for content, and try to land something that we don't already have.
Mhm. I mean, that's super helpful. Okay, how about Alexandra? Just sort of the when to pitch, what's the ideal date, and what should a pitch include?
Yeah. So we do accept submissions on a rolling basis, with the exception of 2 times of the year. The first would be the second half of December as we near the Christmas break, and the second would be the second half of March, which nears our end of fiscal, which is a very hectic time. We encourage folks who are interested in pitching to us to submit their proposals to our doc submissions email, which is just docsubmissions@tvo.org, and that's on our website. If you are going to send a pitch through there, we really ask that you be clear about what kind of support you're looking for. Is your project looking for development support? Is it looking for production support? Is it completed and you're actually looking for us to acquire it via a license fee? If that's the case, just know that we'll want to make sure that you have E&O insurance. I know many folks are already aware of that. Some are not, and I don't want to take for granted that everyone knows that, because there's a cost associated with that. In terms of what we look for in a submission for production or development, please attach your name to your treatment so we know who you are. When we save your pitch materials, if your name is not on the treatment, it means that we have to go digging through our files to figure out who the heck sent us something, and that is not great for you, and it's not great for us. If you do have a sizzle, which often is the case, we would ask that you try to embed your sizzle in your treatment materials, again, because if your treatment somehow ends up separated from your sizzle, we will sometimes miss it, not intentionally, but it just happens. And so we want to make sure that everyone is set up for success. And that's one very easy way that you can set yourself up for success. We will often ask for, yes, some kind of visual treatment. It doesn't have to be elaborate, but we work in a visual medium. So we want to get a sense that you know what kind of film you want to make. Anything about your audience is really helpful, right? We don't want to be a slave to an audience, but we do want to get a sense that you have an audience in mind. Like, filmmakers are artists, but also we make art for other people to enjoy. So who are those people that you envision enjoying your project? And give us a sense of the why, or like the so what, as I will sometimes say. What is it about your project that matters most? We get a lot of projects that are about deeply important subjects. So beyond the subject matter just being really important, why does your film really need to be made? What is it about your film that is urgent or timely? And if it's a historical project, that's totally fine too, but give us a sense of why this historical subject matter needs to be made right now. I'll also add that everything that we commission is funded through the CMF, and there are certain dates when that envelope opens. And so while we accept on a rolling basis, depending on the time of year that you submit your project or whether you're looking for development or production funds, it may mean that there's sort of a longer lead time into when we can give you a response about whether or not we can actually come on board. Are there other things that I should be sharing? I'm trying to...
I mean, I'm sure it's a really complex network of different funds and timelines. And, I'm kind of getting a sense that there's over time, you'll get a sense of what are the funding windows for CMF for various different networks. And, truly building your expertise as a producer is in coordinating all of that. But I feel like there's been some really good tidbits shared so far. If it's okay, Alexandra, I'm going to move on to the other
Just
panel.
let me add one quick thing.
Okay.
It's a new development for us, and I'll be really fast about it because I know we want to get questions in. The number of projects that we've been getting has ballooned, and it's a really great problem to have, but we're asking that filmmakers try to be a little bit more selective in what they send to us. So rather than sending all 10 of your projects that are currently in the works, send us your top 2. Be selective and be intentional with what you're sharing. 2 at once, please.
I think that's a great takeaway to have. Okay, so How about Sheila? I'll ask you next. And just kind of like, what are the dates people should be aware of? And then core things to include in your pitch.
Okay, great. For Absolutely Canadian, you can pitch anytime, but what you do need to know, it's a small regional fund. So all of the regions can only do about 5 films a year. So it is a small fund, and it's a very popular fund because we do work with emerging filmmakers. Number one, like Yasmin said, go to cbc.ca/independent producers. That's CBC's very robust how to work with any different genre that we work with independent producers. So it's documentary, it's scripted, it's everybody, it's comedy, it's drama, lots and lots of details. And for us, if you go to the documentary genre, find Absolute Canadian, and under that list, you will find the 5 different regional producers. And so you would pitch your story to the producer in whose region you live. So for me, it's BC and Alberta. If you live in BC and Alberta, that's you pitch to me. What we're looking for, again, we work with emerging so much, a basic deck with a basic storyline and the main characters and bios. For me, and I think this is true of everybody, I agree with what everybody said so far, answering 2 main questions with passion. Why this story? Why now? If you really dive into those 2 questions, you will give me a lot of information about why this story is so great, so important, must be done. We also need a basic budget, including the other funds you will be applying for to complete your entire budget, because again, it's a broadcast license. We do not have the funds to fund your entire project. Important to note about Absolutely Canadian, the one budget or the one fund that Absolutely Canadian is not able to get into is CBC's CMF envelope. That is not under our genre. So again, your budget can't include the CBC CMF envelope because we can't access it. We need key creatives and their bios, and that's about it. It doesn't have to be super fancy. If you grab our attention with why this story, why now, that starts a conversation, and we will get into the nitty gritty because we are working with really emerging filmmakers. So we try to keep the barriers low.
I love that, Sheila. And I love the, why this story, why now? And if you can really nail that, there's always a bit more of a follow-up conversation you can have around some of the specifics. But I think, at the end of the day, it's all about the story. Okay, quickly moving on to Patrice. Same question.
Okay, so similarly, we take a look at projects on an ongoing basis, but with the caveat that we also are very connected to the different funders and our fiscal year. So typically when we're developing a project, we'll get into the development phase kind of similar, like this time of year, they'll have like potentially 8 months to develop it. And then, when the CMF opens the following fiscal year in April, that project hopefully will be close to ready to go into production. So, there's times where projects may come in and we can start those conversations, but like Alexandra had mentioned, they may need to go on the back burner a little bit until we kind of figure out where things are at for the next fiscal year. In terms of like how to approach us, the first thing is to take a look at our guidelines for independent producers and also familiarize yourself with our programming. So you can find our guidelines if you go to the website at the bottom of the page, click the independent producer guidelines, and that's going to bring up all of the information that you're going to require. So to send it to us, it's producers@knowledge.ca. What are we looking for when you submit to us? Really, what we're looking for is to start the conversation. So we want to have a 1 to 2 page outline describing your story, your subject, your creative approach, what kind of point of view you're taking. Similar to what Sheila had mentioned, we really want a producer statement that really explains why your team, how your team is connected to the content, and why you're the ones that should be telling the story. We want to see bios of the creative team, and if you have a demo of your previous work or links to some of your previous work, that would also be helpful for us. So it's a conversation starter, and then if it's something that is potentially of interest, then we will move further and start to ask for more information. You know, I would also like to point out, like, what, in addition to what Alexandra had mentioned, really important to include your contact information. There's so many proposals that come in that they don't include their phone number. So just be really mindful for us that we get a lot of projects, and so that information is really key. And I think I've covered everything. Am I missing anything?
I think we've covered a lot of bases, but even something as basic as name and contact. I mean, for me, I like to just have it on every page. I'm just like at the bottom, just in case you lose one of the pages, you know, this, here's my email, here's the phone number.
And phone number too.
Yeah, phone number for sure.
Yeah.
Now, last but not least, Yasmin, I want to ask you, and I hate to put the time crunch pressure on
I'll be
you,
super quick.
okay, sounds great.
Good. We accept submissions all year round. For our long-running factual series, now is a particularly good time to send them in, but we accept submissions all year round. The best place to send your submissions is factualpitch@cbc.ca or docpitch@cbc.ca. Again, all this information's in the independent producers page. And if you send it through those email addresses, it's not going to get lost. It's going to get to the right person. There's an incredible woman who manages our department, who keeps us all organized. Shout out to Christian Hamilton. And that way, you know, your project is getting where it needs to be and it's never going to get lost. And then what we're looking for, everything we do goes into development first. We never go straight to production. So that means you can come to us with a little bit less. You can come to us with a 1 to 2 page document and tape if it's character dependent. So, you know, it often is, if you're coming to us with a docuseries type thing like Bollywed or Push, where it's dependent on characters, we're going to want to see tape on the characters. There's no way of us judging whether or not this is something we can move forward with unless we see the stars on tape. And then for documentary, you know, a little more flexibility around that, around whether we need tape at that stage. But it's always helpful if you have a super compelling character to capture something to share with the executives.
Mm-hmm.
And then I echo what everyone else said about, you know, it's a sales document. Think about your audience. We're not looking for an academic dissertation on an issue. You know, this is a film or a series. So bring it to life visually for us. Tell us what we're going to see.
I love it. Don't hand in your PhD thesis, essentially. And I love it that there's in some ways, this is a complicated field and a lot of moving parts to be aware of, but also there's some real core pieces, which is just, again, that story. Why this story? Why now? Now, thanks everyone who asked questions, for waiting patiently for me to get to them. And so I want to start with this first one, which I imagine everyone on the panel will have some experience on. So maybe I can ask for one volunteer to answer this one. And it's on the very fun topic of licensing. Could the team please explain how licensing works for series/documentaries and what emerging creators should be careful about? What should we be talking to our lawyers about? Would one person like to volunteer to answer this question? Or should I pick someone? Okay, you know, Sheila, if you don't mind, I'll pick on you.
Sure. It does vary depending on the genre that you're working with, of course. So I can give you a broad for documentary for Absolutely Canadian. The broadcast license is 6 years. And usually the first 3 years for CBC are exclusive on all CBC channels and platforms, geocached to Canada. So I have programs that are seen in Canada, but they're also seen in India, as long as in India they're geocached and they don't bleed into Canada during the exclusivity period. One of the great things about working with CBC is we have the most amazing business and rights department who actually put on this whole seminar. And we have experts there who work with our producers, and especially, again, for emerging producers, this is just such a great thing. You get to work with them. They're going to do their due diligence on your budget to make sure that, like, the CRA is not going to come after you because you've done some things that are not going to fly. Our contracts also have things like Alexandra was talking about, errors and emissions insurance, super important. Nothing gets released on a CBC platform without errors and emissions insurance. So if you have a broadcast license with us, you own the copyright, that is your responsibility. So we walk you through all these different stages, and really the contract is pretty pretty standard. And then again, if there's a conversation, if you need less exclusivity because there's some other thing that you really, really want to do, you have a conversation with your executive. So nothing is absolutely, it has to be, except things like business and rights, errors and emissions insurance, things like that. Does that answer the question? It's really a conversation per project.
I think that makes sense. I mean, there's some core things around legal and licensing that, yeah, you got to have those T's crossed and those I's dotted. I'm wondering if anyone else wants to quickly jump in before I move on to the next question. And I'll take that awkward silence as a no. This is an interesting question, and one that, I'm sure gets brought up a lot. I'm basically, it's around money. What sort of budgets are we looking at, and a range of budgets? What's sort of the lowest amount that you've ever considered for a project, and perhaps what's the highest amount that you've considered for a project? And for this one, I think it'd be worthwhile to just kind of go around again. But again, let's keep the answers shorter if we can, just around the numbers for this one. Anyone like to volunteer first?
I will, Uytae. For AMI, there is a wide range, but we'd probably look at between $40,000 to $60,000 per half hour is kind of a sweet spot for us. For doc, I know it's low. We can go much higher than that in, once we get CMF involved, etc. There is an opportunity for more, but if you came in with something that's at that level, that's kind of a sweet spot for us.
Very cool. Does anyone here have like budgets kind of outside of that scope? I've seen higher, smaller.
We encourage producers
yeah.
to send us the film they want to make.
Okay.
Yeah. Budgets come later, once we go into funded development, and we'll obviously support producers in whatever way they need to get those budgets made and make sure they're appropriate. And we have teams here who work with producers, but at pitch stage, we encourage you to pitch us the film and the idea you want to make.
Patrice, I saw you unmuted yourself first.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I just, in terms of Knowledge Network, I can tell you that pre-pandemic, the majority of our one-off documentaries, the budget levels were under 300,000. I think things have really shifted within the industry. So I'm speaking specifically for projects that we commission specifically for one-off documentaries, just to give a general sense. But we're seeing budgets coming in more around 400,000 or 500,000. And in terms of Knowledge Network and how we can support it, our license fees will range between 60,000 to 100,000. And then it's up to the producers to be able to fill those gaps. So it could be an allocation from our CMF envelope, tax credits, utilizing some of the other funding sources, whether it's the Rogers Documentary Fund or the Bell Health, or sorry, the TELUS Health Fund, or whatever potential other sources of funding might help close the gap. So just as an example, so that.
Sure.
Uytae, Patrice, you just should make me clarify. I'm talking about our participation in something. So when I say 40 to 60, that's our licensing participation. Right, exactly. So, anything above that, they'd be looking at other funds.
Other funds. That makes sense. Yeah, there's usually the licensing fee is just a portion of it, not the full amount. And sorry, Patrice, I don't know if you cut yourself off there or if you had anything else you want.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of give some general broad strokes. Like every project is different, and there's some projects that come in lower budgets. There's some projects that come in higher budgets, but just kind of wanted to give some kind of sense of where typical projects for our BC commissions land.
Totally. No, really appreciate your insight, kind of internal to your team. Sheila, I see you've had your hand up, and so maybe I'll let you have the last word on this one.
I just want to say for Absolutely Canadian, because it is a small regional fund, our broadcast license is usually around $30,000, but our entire budget is usually The lowest would be around 150,000 going up to 350. But then it's the broadcast license triggers like Bell, Rogers, CMF, Indigenous Fund, the different funds that we can work with.
That makes sense. Oh, and you know what? I do see Adam has had his hand up too, so you have a word for sure.
Sure. So generally, the documentary series that we support kind of come in around $1.5-ish million. That's not APTN's participation in that. There are shows that are more expensive, and there are shows that are less, but that's kind of a sweet spot in terms of budget. And usually the format, or ideally the format, is 13 by 22 minutes for doc series. And I didn't say earlier that we accept pitches for feature-length documentaries year-round. And usually our license fees for feature-length docs are only 50 to 75K, but we play with all the broadcasters. So we've been able to do some pretty high budget and high profile documentaries like Rumble, Indians That Rock the World, and a couple of big movies that are at Hot Docs this year. So it's all about making it work, and the producers have to present their budgets and financing to us to demonstrate that it can make it work, but we're happy to be involved at any budget level.
Right. No, I'm really seeing a big range here of budgets for people to kind of get their idea, and ultimately it sounds like a core consideration is sort of value for money. It's like, for the story you're trying to tell, how can you tell it with the most effective budget possible to some extent? That's really cool. Okay, I think we'll move on to the next question here, and this one is less about money and more about time. Is there sort of a specific time window you're looking for documentaries? Can it be a 90-minute? Are there 90-minute slots? Is there a general sort of time length of documentary you guys are looking for? And for maybe this one, can I go to Alexandra, because I didn't give you an opportunity to ask the last time?
Yeah. Well, that kind of depends if we're looking at a commission or an acquisition. On the commissioning side, because everything is currently funded by CMF and our envelope for us, we will accept singles that can be in the range of, let's say, 52 to 60 minutes, and those can be the hour. And then on the feature side, they're typically in the range of around 90 minutes. Sometimes they'll be a bit longer, and there's some flexibility there depending on the footage that you come back with. We ultimately just want to make the best version of your film. And so there's a level of flexibility in terms of the finished length. On the acquisition side, we're actually starting to look at acquiring shorts in the range of around 20 to 30 minutes that can work well for us. It's relatively new-ish for us and our team, so we're still experimenting with what that could look like.
For sure. And I thought I might throw this question quickly to someone from CBC, because I know CBC posts in a lot of different channels. What are some of the time lengths that you're considering? Maybe can I ask you, Yasmin? Yeah.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, the nature of things are 44 minutes. And there is actually a short doc strand through the nature of things that we encourage emerging creators to check out. It's a great place for emerging creators. So that's the nature of things. And then The Passionate Eye is also 44 minutes. And Doc Channel is for our feature length documentaries. So pretty straightforward, 2 44-minute options, and then Doc Channel for all feature lengths.
I'd also add that GEM has flexibility being streamed. So for my projects for Absolutely, I have to have a 44-minute version for television broadcast, but I can do a feature length of like 70 or 75 minutes that goes out on stream of the same story if it warrants a longer version for GEM.
So there can be two sort of different cuts of the same story,
yes,
just depending on the channel it's being posted in.
Yes.
And that doesn't usually, for nature of things at The Passionate Eye and Doc Channel, it's both air on both. So it would be the same version.
Very cool. Okay. All right. So, well, with the next question, and this might have to be our last question. I'm just judging by the time, but maybe someone from CBC confirm if I've got some extra time for more questions here. Here's an interesting one. How would international co-productions work? And how about docs that use 2 different languages? And in this example, English and Punjabi. Do you guys come across like sort of productions that have a kind of a mixture of different producers that aren't just based in Canada? And I'm seeing Alexandra nod their head, so maybe I can start with you and then anyone
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, so we're able to commission projects that are international as long as they're a treaty co-production. So for example, we have one in post-production that is Canadian-German co-production, and ZDF Arte is on the German side. And that is, kind of half in English and half in German, and it works out really well. And they were able to make their budget work that way. They had additional support. It was a show with a lot of travel involved, so we were really happy that they could have an international partner in place. For us, it really comes down to the content. Does it make sense? Does it make sense to be in multiple languages? And sometimes we'll commission projects that are wholly Canadian, but take place in a totally different country and are a different language as a result of that.
Right. Fascinating. Okay. I'm gonna just assume that I have time for more questions. So maybe with this next one, the question is, can we go directly to you with a finished documentary, or do we need a distributor attached? I'm not sure if I quite understand this question, but I guess do you want a sort of a complete package, something that's already produced, and then do we need a distributor attached? Well, maybe one of you guys on the panel can unpack this one for me. And for this one, maybe if you don't mind, can I pick on you, Patrice?
Sure. Yes. So with Knowledge Network, we can definitely consider a project for potential acquisition once it's complete and the rights are available. So if you own the rights to the film, you don't need to have a distributor on board. You can come directly to us. And so basically the best way to submit to us is if you go to our guidelines. On the acquisition side, we do have an online form in the portal. So we're going to want to know things like, do you have E&O insurance? Do you have a C number? Has the project been on other broadcasters? And then as well as some other information. So yes, you can come directly to us. The best way is through the online portal where there's some specific questions that they'll want to know.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your thoughts, Patrice. And, I think I'm going to end on one last question here. And I really kind of like this sort of topic. It's around evergreen content and kind of what do we think of as evergreen? What really has that sort of lasting power as a story? So the question specifically is, can you talk about the role that evergreen content plays in your reception of pitches? Are you more or less likely to be receptive to a pitch that covers content that is evergreen in its genre? For example, World War II and history. But I think just generally this question of what does an evergreen story look to you? And maybe for this one, I'm gonna give it to you, Adam. Feel like I haven't talked to you in a while.
Sure. So, I think that evergreen content is probably more attractive to all broadcasters to some extent. I might use the feature documentary Nipawista Masawin, which is We Will Stand Up, Tasha Hubbard's documentary about the murder of Colton Bushey and then the trial of his accused killer. That's something that was very much like she was in touch with the family almost immediately after it happened, and she worked with the family through I think a couple of years to make that film. But the themes of the film that she was looking at and exploring, she was talking about so much that was happening in and around like the kind of the cultural environment that created a place in Canada where this could happen and where the reaction could be what it was. And that's the part of the film that makes it really evergreen. There's a film that could have been made where it was really direct reportage following the trial and all of that didn't kind of touch on those bigger themes and didn't make us feel the story in a way that kind of echoes through time. And that's something that could also have been interesting, but it wouldn't attract audiences again and again in the way that film does when we broadcast it on the network. So I think that we need to understand when a project is being pitched, why is it interesting now? Why are people going to be excited about it now? But what about it is going to resonate ideally for a long time.
Oh, I love that. That like there's a bigger picture to this story that you can get into that's beyond just like the journalism of the piece, but really kind of broader takeaways, broader context that help us kind of understand this deeper, story and moment in time, and hopefully is a lesson and a story that can kind of that we can learn from for years and maybe even decades to come. I think on that note, I've been asked to wrap it up. So thank you so much for that final comment, Adam. And thank you so much, everyone here on this panel, for, again, sharing your expertise. I mean, honestly, listening to right now, I feel like we've just created such a gold mine of information and insights that hopefully, I mean, speaking of evergreen content, future producers can come back to over and over again to just get a sense of how the pitching process works, what to pitch, what people like yourselves are looking for in a pitch. So, here are my closing remarks. Thank you so much again, panelists, for talking to us about unscripted documentaries. We would also like to thank the CBC for hosting and the planning partners, CMPA and Cavco, for their continued support on the One Stop series. We hope you, as our audience, found this session useful. I know I have, and that you will be able to join us at another One Stop Business Workshop session sometime in the future, because this is the last one, like I mentioned earlier. And finally, we will send out follow-up emails, which will include a document with today's takeaways and a link to CBC's independent production website, where you can watch previous One Stop Business Workshop videos. There will also be an evaluation form if you have feedback. So it'd be great if you could fill it out so we can learn from you and just get a better sense of how we can present information you need and want when you need it. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone so much, and have a wonderful day.